What's going on, everyone? So I've been mulling over and making several videos and just kind of exploring different ideas and potentials for Sidney Prescott and her involvement in the upcoming Scream. Right, this film is supposed to be really focused and centered on Sidney Prescott and supposed to not really have her family in it much, but they're supposed to be in it. Mark and Kay were supposed to see briefly her kids, all that, but it's supposed to basically kind of feels like it's based on the rumors. Again, always take that stuff with a grain of salt. Kind of feels based on the rumors that it's going to kind of be a Gale and Sidney film that's really driven by those two, which is fine. I'm all for it, right? I am in the camp of I'd prefer them to sooner rather than later move away from Sidney and Gale, but I understand the circumstances, right? You got Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera both depart. You're kind of in the spot. It's like, what's the safest route? Let's bring Sidney. Let's bring Gale back. Nev and Courtney. Cool. You got me. I'm on board. Let's do it. Right? But you need the story to make sense. And you need there to be an explanation and reason for why Ghostface is going after Sidney or why Sidney gets involved with Ghostface. Right? Like, you look at, say, well, obviously she wasn't in Scream 6, but you look at, like, Scream 5. She inserted herself in Ghostface wasn't after. Ghostface wasn't even thinking about it. Ghostface cared less about Sidney Prescott. Ghostface was after Sam and ended up killing Dewey and thus got Sidney involved. And now Sidney felt like, hey, I need to avenge Dewey and go after. So you either A, need to have a good reason why after all this time Ghostface is finally going after Sidney, or, in my opinion, what I think will happen is some events will take place where Sidney inserts herself. So instead of Ghostface actually, I think she'll be the target, but only through her own actions rather than Ghostface specifically going after her. Now, it could be, there's a couple ways you could approach this, right? Like, you could go the route of, maybe information gets leaked on Sidney Prescott. And she has to go and basically get to, I'm going to go after Ghostface before Ghostface comes after me type thing, right? And you have something where I've talked about both Kirby and Gale, where maybe one of them have information on Sidney, right? Kirby is an FBI agent. She might have some sensitive information on Sidney Prescott, her whereabouts, right? I've talked about how Sidney is the potential that Sidney isn't going by Sidney Prescott. And some people might look at that and go, well, Dewey called her Sidney and called her Sid and stuff. Yeah, but he also did the same thing in Scream 3 when she was going under Laura, right? Dewey has an entire scene before Sidney shows up where he's like, come on, Sid, we need you, Sidney, like all that stuff. And guess what? She shows up and everyone knows her as Sidney Prescott, right? Everyone calls her Sidney, right? So, again, Dewey would know that Sidney is going by, we'll just stick with Laura, right? Going by Laura, but it's really Sidney. Probably has her name in his phone as Sidney. He might even have information in kind of like her location, stuff like that, because again, that was her, big brother. That was the guy that she confided in and trusted. And if things went south, she would have went to and called and talked to. Obviously, she got Mark and Kay, but I'm saying, like, if things were going bad or she needed a place to stay or she needed some help or whatever, she's calling Dewey, right? So it makes sense that, hey, Dewey's dead. Gale might have all of Dewey's information or all of Dewey's stuff. Ghostface maybe attacks Gale. Gale escapes, but she knows, like, hey, Ghostface goes through that stuff. He's going after Sidney, and let Sidney know, right? Call Sidney up. Hey, Sid, or maybe he ends up going to Sidney. And it'd be an easy way to insert Gale into the film. And why, Gale's in New York, Sidney's in Seattle, the film's supposed to take place in Seattle. How do these two end up linking up? Oh, well, okay, there's that. And now Sidney feels like she has I need to get my family out of here. I need to get them safe, which supposedly her family and Mark and Kate aren't supposed to be in this film a ton. So if that would make sense. And then, boom, she goes and inserts herself to go after Ghostface, right? Same way with Kirby. Kirby's an FBI agent. She probably has a bunch of sensitive information. She probably has a bunch of details on Sidney Prescott, her real, her actual location, her aliases, all of that stuff. maybe her and her partner also, supposedly, again, rumors, take rumors with a grain of salt, but supposedly Kirby's supposed to be in this film and it's supposed to set up and establish a spin-off series. So if that's the case, it makes sense that, like, hey, maybe her and her partner are, tracking down a Ghostface. Maybe she has some information on Sidney or something, because whatever, maybe there's some tie-in. Ghostface ends up taking out the partner. Kirby ends up escaping, but has to leave the information behind. They get the information. She's got to go hit up Sidney. That can also make sense as to why Kirby ends up being in Seattle and helping Sidney. Because it's like, hey, just to let you know, Ghostface is coming, right? And then maybe Sidney contacts Gale, or Gale is recovering, right? Gale just was brutally attacked and probably should have died. And she's not recovering from that in a week or a month. So maybe she needed a place to stay that was safe, or she felt safe, and boom, ends up staying with Sidney. Now Kirby shows up. Gale and Sidney are like, what are you doing here? And she's like, hey, you guys are in trouble. Ghostface is coming. Boom. Now all three are involved. It's an easy, simple, clean solution. There you go. All nicely wrapped into a bow. And then now the story can take place. And Sidney, again, has to keep her family safe, hides her family, inserts herself. Again, I'd rather be the hunter than the huntee, right? Let's go after Ghostface. Let's bring the fight to him, right? Kind of what they did in Scream 5. Again, like, I think you need to have an explanation. I think you need to have some type of insight and detail as to why Ghostface is all of a sudden going after Sidney Prescott, right? After all these years, after all this time, right? She's been living her best life, just chilling. I mean, she's going on runs, right? Like, with her kids out in the open. She's not a recluse hiding in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, she's out in the open, living her best life. Ghostface could easily be tracking her or keeping an eye on her. So she obviously feels comfortable enough, safe enough, and secure enough to be willing to go do all that stuff. Well, there's got to be a reason behind that. Well, if she's going by a different name or something, or alias, right? And she's married to Mark Kincaid. You don't think an LA detective couldn't, get her a new name or help her assist in that? And, they get new identities and everything like that, and records and all that. So of course they could, right? So again, you could easily have an explanation and kind of tie in to explain everything, rather than just like, because my fear is, if it's not something where Sidney is inserting herself, it either becomes a played out trope that we've seen in every other Scream film. It's the brothers, cousins, nephews, uncles, whatever, right? That's going after Sidney for whatever reason. Or it's something that just seems silly and doesn't really add up and make sense, right? It's just like, oh, well, after all this, like, these people just decided, today we're going to go after Sidney. Right? And I'd like a more thought out, practical explanation. I'd like to feel like, okay, they really took their time to think this through, rather than just like, oh, it's the gardener and the mailman, right? Like, oh, no one saw that coming. Like, I'd rather, or it's the babysitter, right? Like, how many people, like, Sidney's just letting people get close enough to, like, kill her and her family. Like, like, Sidney, you got to imagine, Sidney's probably got all kinds of, like, plans and defaults. And, she's probably got a safe house, and, she's probably got escape routes and plans. I wouldn't be surprised if she has a tunnel under her house, right? Like, it's Sidney. She's lived this her entire life. And there have been Ghostface after Ghostface after Ghostface after Ghostface after Ghostface after Ghostface that has tried to kill her. She's just what? She's just going to be chilling, living her best life in a little suburb somewhere? I just don't buy that. I just don't think that makes sense for Sidney and her character, right? She's going to be prepared. She's going to have it mapped out. She's going to be ready for a Ghostface attack, right? So, how do you get the story to kind of pivot in a direction of where it's like, okay, it kind of makes sense. You put her family at risk to where she has to go and have her family, and she now feels like, I gotta take charge here, right? Because if they track me down, or they track my family, and I don't want to be around my family, because if they track me down, then now my family's in jeopardy, and blah, blah, blah. At least they're safe and secure and they're away, more likely than not, in the end, they'll end up being captured. Sidney's not going to go help them. Whatever, right? Like, there's a million ways you can spin this, twist it, pop it, zip it, right? Pop it. Now, but no, in all seriousness, right? Like, I want a realistic reasoning and explanation. And I think the easiest way to kind of approach this film is to have something take place early on that now requires Sidney to insert herself and get involved, similar to Dewey. Now, I don't think that they're going to go the route of like killing Gale or anything like that, because again, Gale is supposed to be a big part and fixture in this film. So I don't think that they're going to go that route where, they're just going to take out Gale and there you go. No, I think that it'll be something where, again, something takes place, some event unfolds that now has Sidney's attention, in which she feels like, I got to protect my family. I need to go, instead of waiting for Ghostface to come and take me out, I need to go take out Ghostface. And gets her away from her safeties and her securities and all that stuff. And now she's kind of out in the open. And you have this Ghostface versus Sidney showdown. I think that is the best approach in my opinion. But as with all videos, as always, I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you feel that, yes, it makes the most sense to have Sidney kind of insert herself, Sidney kind of get involved, that something happens, right? Whether it's through Gale or Kirby or another character, or, there's a million ways that you can kind of tie it full circle to make it make sense to tie into Sidney and, her have to get involved. Do you want it to be a death? Do you think like, oh man, you kill, you kill Gale, or you kill, somebody close to her or whatever, maybe it's her best friend or something, right? I mean, again, could you make it to where it makes sense and Ghostface is going after? Yeah, of course. There's all, good writing can solve anything, right? But my fear, just based on what we've seen with Scream 5 and 6, is that it's not going to be super fleshed out. It's going to be kind of like, oh, Ghostface just rolled into this town and Sidney just happened to be there. It's like, really? That's where we're going, rather than just like a cohesive, fluid story. But again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out. We enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.